This is Continuum Drag, a podcast where we watch sci-fi, fantasy, and everything in between. This week, Frank Herbert's Children of Dune, Part 3.
History is written on the sands of Arrakis, where rebellion and civil war continue to breed, fed by Alia's brutal tyranny and repression, as she sinks deeper into the abomination of her own ghost. Unable to recognize the forces conspiring against her.
Welcome to Continuum Drag, the podcast seeking sand trout recipes. I'm Luke, here with my co-host Jordan. What's real, Jordan?
The sand trout didn't look anything like I would have thought when I heard sand trout. I was like, oh, sand trout. They'll look like trout or like a fish, like a white fish or something like that. But like, they look like bugs.
Well, it doesn't help that they're just baby sandworms and they call them sand trout for some reason.
That's what it was, right? They're just baby sandworms.
Yeah, that's all it is. I wrote in my notes, I'm like, oh, baby sandworms. And they're like, did you see the sand trout? I'm like, excuse me? Well, Jordan, before we get into this final part, we'll finish off the Dune sequel here in a second. I decided to put a little game together for us just to have some fun to do. We've done this before. You have previously known it as an Echo.
Yeah.
It was our version of the EGOTs, the Emmy, any Canadian award, a Hugo, and an Oscar. But having done this now quite a few times, it's become very apparent to me, probably to you too, very few things win a Hugo, so often the Hugos was just zero.
Yeah. So
I've decided to change it. Our version of the EGOT is now the Seco.
So what is that now?
It's SECO. That is a Saturn Award. Okay. Obviously, the big science fiction TV movie awards. There's a lot more awards handed out to. It's not books. It's more media, which is probably better for us. That's why I did the change. Still the Emmy, still Canadian awards, and still the Oscars. We're swapping the Hugo for the Saturn, basically.
Okay.
And we get a new acronym. The SECO, Jordan.
The SECO. I like it. Or SECO.
SECO. Now, let's first of all, we're going to get into this. Do you want to do? I'm changing things up so much, so let's see how we go. But do you want to say at the top of your head, do you think this is a SECO award winner? Do you think it has won all 4 awards?
I'm almost positive this won an Emmy for some visual effects. So I'm going to go yes. I think it cleared the board.
It swept the board. It swept with the SECO.
Yeah, I said cleared the board, swept the board. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because, like, obviously we're coming into it. It's coming off the acclaimed miniseries beforehand. Obviously, this one's an improvement on the previous one, and I mean, to that point, so this one's got Susan Sarandon and James McAvoy in it. So, like, I just to set the stage for you as you're making these next guesses, like, we're coming in. Well, some might say a little hot. But let's start with the Saturn Awards. How many Saturn Awards do you think the people involved with this have won? And we're talking writer, director, producer, and the lead cast.
I'm gonna say 3.
3 Saturn Awards.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, it was only 1 Saturn Award, which was won by Alice Cringe, as some call her. And she won it for Star Trek First Contact.
Did she really?
Mm-hmm.
I have to say, though, Star Trek has had some spotty records with some of their acting. She was phenomenal in that movie.
Oh, absolutely. She deserves the award for sure.
Yeah, she was great.
She gave Picard someone to act against.
Yeah, and it was just like, it was very like breathy and like weird, and you're like, am I attracted to her? I can't tell.
All right. The second category, Jordan, Emmys. How many Emmys do you think have been won by the people involved in the show? Okay,
I'm going to get way higher than I think. This feels like when we have long drives, we guess license plates. That's the excitement we have in the car. But I'm going to guess 6.
Jordan, it has won only 2 Emmys. one to the director. He won an Emmy for an episode of House.
Okay.
And one to the producer for making Anne Frank the whole story.
Ooh. I'm glad it's not just the juicy bits. That's terrible. But didn't this win an Emmy as well? Or maybe it was just the first series?
It did not win an Emmy.
I was sure this one did. So there you go. What do I know?
Now, here's the one where you may have made a misstep. We'll see. We'll see how you feel about this. Because the third category, of course, is Canadian awards.
There's got to be some Canadian involved in this. I'm going to say one. They've won one Canadian award.
You're going to say one Canadian award.
Yeah.
Jordan, you did it. There was one Canadian award.
Yeah.
It was a genie, and it went to Susan Sarandon for Atlantic City.
I know Atlantic City. That's with what's his
Burt
face?
Lancaster.
That's right, Burt Lancaster. Yeah. I've seen it.
I haven't seen it.
Movie?
It looks good.
It's like it's just funny. I honestly watched that as a kid. I don't know why. Like a kid, like 6 or something. And it's like a moody, like I think like a noir, sort of like neo-noir, if I remember correctly. It's been like over 30 years.
She was nominated for an Oscar for that role as well. So I'm interested. I'm gonna go check it out.
Burt Lancaster, nice.
And finally, of course, Jordan, that brings us to the Oscars. How many Oscars do you think have been won by this cast and crew?
It's got to be 3.
It's got to be 3?
Yeah.
Why do you think 3? I'm just curious.
I don't... Has Susan Sarandon ever won an Oscar? I don't think so. I don't know if Burt Lancaster... I just feel like there's some people...
Burt Lancaster's not in this movie.
That's right. No, I've decided Burt Lancaster's in this. I just feel like there's some pedigree. Like, obviously you have people like Burt Lancaster involved, so...
Jordan, there is one Oscar win for this.
Yeah.
Susan Sarandon for Dead Man Walking.
Oh, right. Dead Man Walking. Her and, what's his face?
Penn.
Sean Penn, yeah.
The listener couldn't see. Jordan was like pointing at his face and going up and down, indicating a thin face.
That's right. Sean Penn, yeah.
But you did it right. It has won a Seiko.
Yes, there you go. Hey, that might be one of the... I mean, obviously it's a new category, but might be one of our first things that have won something in all our categories.
I feel like we might have had one once before, but I do think the Hugo is always the hardest one to crack.
Yeah.
You know what the easiest one to crack is?
Canadian award.
You know it.
Celebrating mediocrity.
All right, Jordan. Let's not rag. Some good things win. Atlantic City. Yeah, I remember it being good. Maybe it's not, but I'm, just like this show's got Burt Lancaster in it. Well, here's the IMDb summary for part 3. As Alia becomes totally possessed, she also has to deal with rebel Fremen. Ganima, who survived an attack on her by House Corino, is now engaged to Farad'n Corino? I'm definitely mispronouncing that. Yeah. Unexpectedly, Leto 2 returns from the desert, being believed dead. And that truncated summary was courtesy again of Master Ryder.
Thanks, Master Ryder. A few things I'll say. One, I think what happens to Leto, I think this was the thing you said in the very beginning when we started. You were very excited to see how they were going to do it. I feel mixed results. We'll get to it. How he visually looks. I felt like in the last installment to this, because this is a trilogy of movies, essentially, these miniseries. The second one kind of had the usual problem with the second movie, which is like it feels a little bit unfinished. It's setting up a lot of things for the third movie. This is trying to now land all the stuff we've kind of been trudging through, and I feel like it kind of does it. But I did feel like at the very end of this, I was like, huh, it was all for that, huh?
I feel you. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, let's get into it. It pretty much picks up right, obviously, where part 2 left off. Alia has gone full insane despot. She's fully wearing a tinfoil dress. She's out of her mind.
Yeah. And she wears it almost the whole thing. It's like a shoulderless, like tinfoil dress. And she's basically created through her draconian sort of policy. She's essentially made like a civil war.
Yeah. Leto 2, of course, killed those 2 CGI dragons we saw. Not that we expected any less, but after killing them, he ditched his sister Ganima to go to Jackaroot on a sandworm. And like the other kind of characters we were tracking were Lady Jessica and Duncan Idaho. They ran away from the capital, and they're now seeking sanctuary, and they are going to be headed toward Princess Susan Sarandon at House Carino.
That's right. Yeah. That's where everyone is.
So I've tried to break this down to make it a little smoother, because this obviously jumps all over the place. There's a lot of plot lines to follow. So I've tried to make this as streamlined as I can here to talk about Jordan. So feel free to stop me, but like we're going to start kind of without Leto too. We're going to come back to him at the end and kind of just follow the plot line as best we can through the rest of the characters in a straight line. But essentially, after getting out of that cave and the lions were killed, Ganima hooks up with the Fremen and Stilgard, and for reasons I'm only vaguely aware of, she like kills a guy who's about to have sex because he betrayed them.
Yeah, so I wasn't sure. So it's a really weird scene because you're right. The way of talking about all the different plots happening, I actually thought at first it was Leto, because the way they shot it, we had a scene with Leto and said like he was coming into town or something, and then suddenly. So it's like you have these people who are kind of like looking to fool around outside of town, and then as it's happening, she comes and stabs the guy in the back. And I think what they said, and someone who knows these books could correct me, I think he was a guy who was working with Susan Sarandon to put the little things in, like the little trackers, into the CGI lions. I think that's who he was.
Yeah, I do also agree. I think he's working with Sarandon, something to do with CGI lines, but it kind of comes out of nowhere, and I was like, they're like, you betrayed us. I'm like, sure, I've never seen this man in my life, but okay.
Yeah, so it's kind of showing like she's taking her revenge in whatever way she sees it, and it on a very personal level, because that's basically where she has to operate. She doesn't have the abilities like Alia. Is it Alia? Alia, who's working on a grander scheme of like, you know, her revenge is across the whole city. Right.
But of course, word spreads that Ganima's alive, did not get killed in the desert, which, reaches Susan Sarandon, which is not what her plan was. She was supposed to kill them both out in the desert. So she's smart, though. Susan Sarandon's a good plotter. She pivots. First thing she does is she's like, all right, number one thing we got to do, we got to drive Alia even crazier. Find that guy that Ganima killed. Carve a bunch of slurs about House Atreides into it and deliver it to her, so she gets more mad at the Fremen because she thinks that the slurs were carved by the Fremen.
Yeah, I think this is one of the things that probably works better in the book. This was just like, it was like we're gonna carve up the thing. Where you're like, okay. I just didn't know if that worked, and I think it felt like you needed more information than what we were given. on screen.
I mean, she already seemed so crazy. I was like, is this making her more crazy? And I don't know. Anyway, and her second pivot is she grants sanctuary to Lady J and the Dunk, and she's like, hey, Lady J, Dunk, let's team up. Let's like get together. Let's become a group. It's the good guys and the bad guys. We're gonna work together. And she's just like, here's what we'll do. My son, he wants to be trained in the Bene Gesserit ways. You take over that. I don't really like him. I think he's weak. I think he's a slow learner. I don't think he can do it. But for some reason, he said he also might want to be seduced by you, Lady Jessica. So I don't know. Look into that, I guess.
Yeah, there's definitely this weird undertone of like, are they going to get together?
They don't, though.
No, they don't.
And in return, Susan Sarandon's just like, here's what we do. Strategic marriage alliance. We marry my weakling, no good son to Ganima back on Arrakis. We calm down. Like, all the houses are up in a roar. They think Arrakis is about to fall to civil war. They're going to try to take the kingdom from themselves. We settle down the houses because we got 2 powerful houses together. We're putting Arrakis back under control, and that'll solve our problems. And she's like, that's the plan. So what we're going to need to do is we need to send Duncan Idaho back, talk to his wife, and just get her on board. Let's get her on board with this plan.
Yeah. And actually, that's a better plan than the, marking up some dead body. That's actually a decent plan. It's the same thing, I think, that the plan was back when they had Paul marry someone from their family, right? It's like, we'll at least have someone from our side over there that can give us information at the very least.
Yeah, certainly in the tone of these books, it makes sense. And obviously, Susan Sarandon has the upper hand. She has a good place to negotiate from, and like it makes a lot of sense. Anyway, back on Arrakis, Allie has traveled into the desert to meet with Stilgard, who's holding Ganima, not hostage, but that's where she showed up. And essentially, Stilgard's like, "Hey, we'll give you back your niece, but I'm not coming back to the capital. You're causing too much trouble. I'm going to create neutral ground here where we can have negotiations with the rebelling Fremen and like House Atreides and try to like bring this like agreement." Or this conflict to an end. But if I hear you hurt Ganima at any point, neutral territory off, I side with the rebels and I come after you. Like that, like we go to full war. And that sort of like just sort of sets the stakes that like Stilgard's going to try to like find neutral ground. He's going to act as this ambassador in the middle of the desert to try to find some sort of like peace and try to keep Alia from going any further crazy.
Yeah.
Duncan, of course, arrives on Arrakis. He pretty easily convinces Alia of the strategic marriage. He's just like, it'll work. And she's like, okay, sounds good.
Yeah, it's funny. The scene probably was supposed to have a little bit more weight, a little more tension based on how they had, like, he's escaped. He's her husband still, but he is so against how she's acting and her policies that he's had to flee. So there's supposed to be like the tension. There's a lot of like, she's like, I should throw you in prison. He's like, you won't because I'm handsome, sort of thing. And yeah, she's like, but yeah, it's a pretty good idea. I'll let them get married. And that's it.
I do like there's a brief cutaway at some point. They're like, someone finally tells Ganima, they're like, oh, you're gonna marry one of the Carino kid, and she's just like, I'll kill him.
Yeah, she was just like, yeah, you do it. I'm just give me a big knife because. Cool, I'm gonna kill him, no big deal. And they're like, yeah. All right, proceed.
But now that Allie has agreed, she's like, great, this will solve some of my problems, but Duncan, I need you to go to Stilgard and try to negotiate the peace on my behalf. We need to end the Civil War too. Like, Duncan, I know we're getting divorced, but like, can you take care of this for me?
Yeah. And he's like, yeah, he's cool. He's like, yeah, I'll meet you halfway.
Is he cool, though? Because he gets there, and it turns out Duncan is not even remotely interested in helping his ex-wife. He's still pretty upset she cheated on him.
Yeah.
That's not really it. Like, he doesn't trust her. He thinks she needs to be overthrown, and he's like, Stilgard, man, you got to get your shit together. You got to go take her out. That's the only way. And Stilgard's just like, no way, dude. I don't pick sides. This is Switzerland. This is neutral territory.
Yeah.
So Duncan picks a fight with some rebel Fremen who's at the negotiation table. The Fremen comes at him. Duncan kills the dude with a knife. And he's just like, hey, Stilgard, I killed someone at your neutral table. What are you going to do about it? And, like, I guess Stilgard's honor means he has to avenge the death by killing Duncan. So he murders Duncan at the table. And he's just like, well, Duncan's plan worked. Because he killed that guy, he forced the honor of me killing him. And by me killing him at the neutral table, he's the representative of Atreides. So now we have to go to war with Atreides.
What you just said, that little paragraph there, is essentially what it's like watching this show, where you have to have everyone saying thing, but then you have to stop and go.
Explained to you at all
Everything
times.
has to be explained because you're just like, hey, you know this guy walked into the door? Well, the door was actually made by this family, and that family made doors for years. But the other family supplied them lumber, and you didn't know that. But when they were supplying lumber, they actually put powder in the lumber, and you're just like, oh my goodness, guys! Like, and it's like that every time. So every scene, I feel like on this, for better or worse, and I think sometimes a lot of times this one, particularly for worse, is that because they're trying to be so true to the books, and I think there's some merit in that it hurts the pace and it hurts any sort of tension you have. Like, this scene doesn't have anything, like, you don't feel really bad for Duncan because you're like, what? He's died? But he was glad he died because it started the war and got the people to stop being neutral.
Like, and Stilgard has to go to war because he killed him now? Because, like, I'm like, I don't think you do, Stilgard. Like, I don't see, like, just because you have to because you said something. I'm like, you don't feel any of these characters have any real motivation, or there's like, well, the script says I do this now, so I do.
Yeah, and there's a lot of text we're missing, so people are doing things. You're like, okay, like, trust me, it's because there's this thing happening, and because this is simmering under the scenes.
Yeah, it's like, okay. Trust me. If we had 20 more episodes, we would have figured a more subtle way to weave this all in, but we don't. So what happens is he kills this guy, and I got to kill him, and now we're at war.
It's a good point. I think we said this at the first episode we're doing. If this had been maybe a season of TV, like 10 hours, they probably could have been a little bit more nuanced with things. But because, weirdly to say, they're doing these 3 movies, it's like everything has to happen at a breakneck pace. But weirdly at the same time, it's like they just keep getting caught in the weeds of stuff. It's a very bizarre feeling of like, there's constantly people talking, but you're like,
that's
but
just
to what
You're
effect?
just cutting between plot lines where people talk and explain a plot point to you to push it forward, but there's no action really around it. And like, here's the thing, Jordan, what I've just described basically gets us to the 3rd act. So that's like an hour of the show I just described in probably 8 minutes.
You're right. There's so much information coming at you. You're just like, I remember I was watching it and I was like, okay, I got to pay attention. I got to try to follow this. But you know that it doesn't really matter because you're going to get to the next scene anyway. You know, you're like, I don't really need to know these motivations because I know where we're getting. You know what I mean? It's like, you can just see it. So it's like, keep talking, guys, I guess.
Yeah, it's weird. But before we get to the 3rd act, obviously, we haven't been talking about Leto too, so we'll go back to him. And of course, last time we saw him killing the CGI lions, he's gone off. He's arrived at this Fremen lost civilization of Jackaroot. And when he gets there, he's tranquilized, I guess, by the lost tribe. Like, they set up this woman who tranquilizes him. Like, oh, is this a meet cute? Is he going to meet his Cheney in the desert?
It was so weird.
No, not at all. Like, and like the implies like there's like someone directing her to do something. Like, I'm like, how many people are here? Is there just 2 people? Like, it doesn't make like, what's the point? Like, they start feeding him. I kept calling it worm milk, but I guess it was spice essence, which is like causing him to go insane. And they're like trying to turn him into an abomination like Alia. But I'm like, to what end?
I have an even larger question, and this is going to drive people crazy who know these books. And I'm sorry in advance. I'm not trying to be difficult, but I don't even really understand how I'm supposed to feel about Leto. I kind of understand Paul, that Paul's this set up as this messiah, this person who's going to fix everything. And then what ends up happening is they're just people. You can't put, people are fallible. We're all going to make mistakes. They're going to make bad decisions. And Paul, whether he knew he had to do it or not, sort of went down this path and essentially became a villain and then, left because of it. I kind of get that, But Leto, I don't know. I'm like, am I supposed to feel like he's repeating his dad's mistakes, or is he fixing them, or is he... I just don't know, because it's like he has something, and specifically in this episode of the miniseries, he has taken on this sort of odd way of thinking and talking and acting, where he's suddenly like very prophetic. And I know it's obviously he's going through these transitions of getting fed spice and all this stuff, but I'm just like, I don't know how I'm supposed to feel about him or his journey. Did you feel the same way?
I think it's a decent comment, because it is, when we meet him, he wants to go on adventures, but he also seems to like see the future. He understands the golden path, and he also wants to follow it. So he's just kind of like, he's just kind of following it because, like, we don't know why he's doing it. He just kind of is. And so even here, when he's caught and he's just like drinking worm milk, and he's just like, you can feed me all the more milk you want, I'll never become an abomination. And he's like, has a vision where he's on Arrakis, but there's grass everywhere and all the sandworms are dead. I'm like, okay. And he comes back, he's like, well, you didn't do it. You didn't turn me into a monster, which you were trying to do for reasons that I don't know. Like, I the audience, I'm like, I don't know what these guys want or why they're doing this to him. And then it doesn't work, so he just gets out of the bed they've held him in, walks down to the sandworm breeding pit where they keep the sand trouts, all the little baby sand trouts flopping around, jams his arm in. The sand trout climb up his arm and like leech onto him, and he develops a skin condition. Yeah.
So what I think they're supposed to be doing is he's slowly turning into a sandworm or some sort of human sandworm hybrid. But
that is what's supposed to happen. Yes.
So visually, it doesn't quite work, because yes, it's sort of like, it's not the worst effect ever, but it's like
it's pretty close to the worst effect ever.
It's like scales, but they don't look great. And it's unfortunately.
There's some scales a little bit up his arm and a little bit on his chest, but not more than that. Do you understand? All the drawings I've ever seen of sandworm Leto is he's a worm that has a human head gooping out of its face. It looks disgusting. He always looked like a disgusting freak hybrid. Yeah. And this is just like I'm like an X-Man who sucks.
What they should have been is, remember we watched way, way, way back years ago when we first started this. There was that show where it took place in space, and then they found out the whole species were run by this big blob thing.
Yeah.
It should have been that. It was just the most hideous thing you've ever seen. It should have just been like, they should have put all their budget into a practical effect of something like gross.
I thought that was what it was leading up to. I thought the whole point of this was to lead up to this. Like, I 100% expected something insane. And it's like just handsome guy with his shirt off with just like a minor skin condition. And then like he goes out in the desert. He's like, well, I'm now a half man, half worm, I guess. Time to use my worm powers. And he runs like low budget Sonic the Hedgehog.
He does.
Like it looks like it's from a TV movie with Sonic the Hedgehog. He's like, I'm running fast.
You make an interesting point, and I don't disagree. But here's what I found peculiar is, I actually genuinely thought the second episode looked really good. And this one
looks
doesn't.
Bad again. This looks bad again.
I agree. And I was like, is it just me? It's like, I don't know what happened. It just doesn't look good again.
It baffled me too. I had the same thought. Anyway, Leto 2 is out there worming out in the desert, whatever he's doing. And he finally bumps into his blind preacher father, Paul. And they have a heart-to-heart. Paul reveals, listen, he says a lot of things here that I couldn't fully follow. But my best understanding is Paul's just like, hey, I was too scared to worm out like you are to complete the golden path. So that's why I disappeared into the desert and became this blind preacher.
Yeah.
But he didn't want that for his son. But like Leto's like, no, it's cool. Like, this is great. If I do this, I'm gonna give humans freedom of choice. And it's just like, explain yourself, sir. That makes no sense. How is worming out gonna do that?
I thought the same thing. It's like, was my problem with Leto. He gets to this point. He seems very pleased with it. He seems fine that he's like half lizard or whatever he is. And I'm like,
worm.
Okay, worm. But trout, but to what effect? And it's like they have this. You're right. They have this conversation where they both sort of like talk in this weirdly philosophical manner, where they both. It's these like high-minded ideas, but like as a viewer, I'm like, how am I supposed to feel? That's all I want to know. Am I supposed to feel bad that Paul didn't achieve his goals? Am I supposed to feel good that Leto is happy with his transition? Am I actually supposed to feel mixed about that? Maybe this is history repeating itself in a different way. Like I don't know, because all I could focus on, to be honest, is Paul didn't have any eyebrows.
I do want to say this. This time I got a real good look at Paul, the desert preacher.
Yeah.
He looks like a caveman. They look like they gave him an extended brow. He doesn't like. I'm like, why do they make him a caveman? I don't understand.
I think what they were trying to do was show that he'd been in the desert so long that he's had like the sun has been beating on him. So I think it's like made his eyebrows go away. But what you see is you're right. They've just extended his head. It looks so bad.
So weird. And then so they have this conversation. We don't even I don't understand. Like, I'll give humans freedom of choice by doing this. I'm like, as far as I can tell, people have free will. They're just tyrants. I don't understand how worming it. It doesn't matter. It makes no sense. Like, what the goal is and what he's done, the sacrifice he's made, makes zero sense. They don't explain it at all. And then Paul's been traveling with like a Fremen guide because he's a blind man, and then his caretaker's like, oh, I'm also a traitor and I have a bomb on me. I'm like, who are you, sir? And then like Leto 2 is just like, allow me to use my worm powers. And he like Sonic the Hedgehog's over to the guy, slits his throat, and then Hulk style throws him across the desert. I'm like, I guess those are worm powers.
It's to my point earlier. I give them credit for trying to be so true to the book, but they just add these scenes in where I'm sure in the book this makes a lot more sense because we know who this guy is, but we've never seen it before. And they're like, well, we have to have the scene where he tries blowing them up with a landmine. You're like, why? Why? Yeah, there was no reason. But like they have so many of these things. You're like, it feels like, and maybe this is a sacrilegious thing to say, but I wish they had made this with an audience in mind that doesn't know that much about Dune, because there's nothing wrong with staying true to it and giving the most evocative representation of this world and trying to be as detailed as possible. But you can't just throw in information and expect us to go, oh, well, I know that because I've read the book. That's just bad storytelling then. So, or a bad adaptation, because both of us are confused as to how we're supposed to feel. And that's a bizarre way to sit as an audience for an hour and a half and be like, I don't know who I'm supporting any of these people because I don't understand what they're talking about. And also, Paul's out the eyebrows.
At any rate, then Leto 2 and Paul bump into Gurney, who's out riding sandworms in the desert. He's just cruising around. They're like, let's go hook up
Gurney. Okay.
Yeah, let's go hook up with the rebel Fremen. And guess what? It's time for the wedding, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, I want to say I really liked Susan Sarandon's headdresses in this.
Yes. Here's what I say. I did like when Susan Sarandon and Alice Krige got together. They had some good scenes together.
I would agree. The both of them are the standout performances in this. And again, I'll say this again. The worst one is this Alia. It's just like, and I feel bad because I think it's not her fault, but man, it's not great.
So the Fremen now, the wedding's about to happen. The Fremen rebels are all together. They've all united under Stilgard. They bring their worms and surround the capital, and they're attempting to lure Alia out to battle. And Alia's like standing on a like outlook, and she's looking at them, and she's just like they did at the end of Dune 1. I'm not falling for that. And then she walks inside, and I'm like, oh, I guess that's over.
Yeah, so I had a question about that. So they've gone all their way. There's this triumphant scene of them riding all these sandworms, dozens of them, maybe more. And they get to the wall, and they're like, "We're here," and she's like, "I don't care." And then she walks away. And then what do? They're just like, "We'll go back." Like, why didn't they just storm it regardless? Why do they care if she's standing there or not?
I can't tell you. I just like she's like, I remember this from the time it happened before in Dune 1. I'm like, so I'm not doing anything. I'm like, well, I'm glad we had all these scenes.
I know, it was so odd.
Susan Sarandon arrives with her son for the wedding. As soon as they get off the spaceship, her son immediately reveals all her treachery as a wedding gift to his new bride. And Susan Sarandon's like dragged off to jail, but she's just like, you know what, son? You impressed me a little bit there. Good conies on you.
Yeah, she's like, you really screwed me, but I like the cut of your jib now. You're a real man's man.
Yeah.
Now, I have a question for you. I got the sense, and maybe I'm wrong, I think that they seeded it a little bit. And I think it was the first episode that he was going to do things differently. He didn't see eye to eye with his mom.
Yeah,
he
absolutely.
Had it, and so this is the culmination of that. I get it.
Yeah, 100%.
But I got a little bit of a sense that he maybe was doing this because he really wanted to hook up with Ganima.
Well, I think there's a little bit of that too. I think he's into her, and I mean, it works. Ganyma's like, well, maybe it won't kill you after all.
Yeah, it's one of those things. It's like, yeah, we'll throw everyone under the bus if I got a little chance there.
Yeah. Well, Ganima goes. She goes to put on her wedding gown up in her dressing room, and who should appear in her dressing room but Leto 2 dropping in to make out with his sister.
This scene. Remember, I said it before.
You said it.
It's weird. It's weird, and they really play up to it. It's like it was literally a scene where like I thought they were gonna do it. Like, she's, like, getting dressed, and he comes in. He's also half-dressed. And then they start kissing, and they're like, we missed you. And I was like, this is weird, guys. And then it just, like, doesn't go there. But, like, they knew what they were doing.
I was also just like, I don't understand what this is either. Anyway, outside, there's a crowd waiting for the wedding to happen. Paul comes out. He's just like, I'm going to rile this crowd up. I'm going to tell them all about how we all got to get on the golden path. It's time to get on the golden path. Rise up against your dictators. Everybody loves the golden path. Someone comes out of the crowd and stabs him. I think maybe he worked for Alia, maybe not. I'm not 100% sure. But he gets stabbed and dies in the crowd. He's like martyred or something. And then Leto 2 reveals his other worm ability, which is teleportation, and he teleports there, picks up his father's body, and teleports away.
Yeah. Now let's stop with Paul getting killed. Like, okay. Don't you think should have had a little bit more to that scene? Like, it was like he sort of like he tears apart the market and he starts giving this speech.
Yeah, it's very much Jesus in the what is it? Jesus in the cathedral. What is that? What is that fable?
Yeah, in the market or whatever outside. And he like tossing over the tables. That's clearly what they were going for. And then he's giving this speech. But like again, I don't know if I'm supposed to be like, is Paul continuing what he's doing, or is he like feeling bad about what he was talking about, because he's sort of like going on and he's like, and the real traitor is Alia, and I was like, to be fair, you kind of left her. by yourself. And then he gets stabbed, but it's just sort of like, anyways, he's dead. I'm like,
well, they try to build
the main
tension because like there's some guy walking through toward him, and then you've got also Gurney running to the crowd to get to him, and you're like, there's like trying to build tension, like who's gonna get there first? And I'm like, I don't know who this other guy is.
I know. So yeah. Anyways, and then they have a scene where Gurney stabs him like 50 times.
I did love above the whole thing. Allie is watching this all go down. She's dressed in jeans and a halter top. She just has blue jeans and a halter top on. I'm like, what happened to the costumes in this movie?
She wanted to be casual. She wanted to be casual in because
it was
also why was she down there in like in disguise? Why couldn't she have just like heard about it later from?
Well, I think she was standing on the balcony watching it from above. I don't know. I was just like, is this a rehearsal you guys shot? Like she just didn't show up in wardrobe.
Yeah.
Anyway, all this happened. Paul's been killed. Leto 2 stopped by to make out with his sister. The mother of the groom has been arrested. But you know what? They put that down payment down on the caterer, so this wedding still has to go.
Yeah, I thought the wedding was off after like he made the big speech, but they're like, all right, wedding time. I was like, oh, that's how it's gonna end. Okay.
Yeah, so the wedding vaguely starts, and then of course Leto 2 teleports in with his new powers and like crashes the wedding.
He
and
beats everyone up.
He beats a bunch of guards. He's like, now I gotta fight you, Aunt, and he fights Alia for a bit, and then like the whole family like rallies around and starts like shouting out Baron Harkonnen's ghost. They're like, get out of here, ghost! You're a bad ghost.
Yeah, and like I did kind of feel bad for her because like she's this like person that had no chance. And yeah, but like, so he, Baron, whatever his name, Harkonnen, really is like, he's kind of comes out at this point. You can see that she's, 100%, controlled at this point. And then it's this real like standoff with like, he's trying to convince her to stab Leto. But like, I didn't feel any tension because I knew exactly what was going to happen. I'm sure you did too.
Well, that's it. They basically are like, we're not going to kill you, Alia. Here's a knife. You have to kill yourself. And I'm just like, is this what mental health is in Arrakis? Because you guys need to help this person.
So, of course, she stabs herself as the only way she can defeat Harkonnen, and she dies. Then everyone's like, well, let's put that unpleasantness behind us.
Was it she dies? The wedding doesn't continue. It cuts away to an unspecified period of time. They're just like, well, the rebellion's over. I'm like, it is?
Yeah, because I guess once she's dead, everyone's like, there's no point fighting anymore. But one would assume there'd be some sort of structure set up where the same policies or whatever would continue.
Yeah. They kind of need to wrap up now. Like, they literally cut. They're like, rebellion's over. Great news, everybody. And then Leto's like, well, that's it for me. Time to run around the desert as Sonic the Hedgehog and stay on the golden path, whatever that means. And he just runs off into the desert. Like, he doesn't have a goal. He's just like, bye, and he runs off. And then you...
I just say, and then we get to like a voiceover, and Jessica's like, well, he'll just keep running.
Well, it's not Jessica even. It's Ganima standing on a hilltop watching her brother run around the desert like Sonic the Hedgehog with Susan Sarandon's son, and she's just like, people don't know. Leto 2 really wants to die. And he's like, excuse me? She's like, but he has to face his sacrifices. I'm like, he wants to die? What do you mean? And she's like, anyway, I was going to marry you, Corino's son, but instead you're going to be my consort like my mom Chaney was for some reason. And he's like, okie dokie. And I'm like, end of the movie. And then just the credits roll. I'm like,
yeah. Well, but that's why I was felt with that feeling of like, what? Because she's like, yeah, so I guess Leto had to make a sacrifice. I was like, what was it? To be a worm? And they're like,
I guess
like,
so.
Which fixed everything. I'm like, how? And they're like, and he's got to run around forever. I'm like, why? And they're like, because he wants to die. I'm like, did he?
I'm like, he seems pretty happy from everything I've seen.
He loves running. He loves it. He can't get enough of it.
And she's just like, and I'm not going to marry you anymore, but you can be my consort. I'm just like, why? I don't care.
Well, I know. She makes that point. She's like, we could be together, but not as my husband. He's like, yeah, whatever. I don't care.
Oh, I felt the same way. I'm like, I don't care either.
but I do love that for all of the pageantry of this and all of the costumes and the world building and the back histories and the motivations, everything. The problem is, the main point of this from Paul all the way through Leto is, I don't understand not only what they're trying to do, what they did do. I just don't know. I don't know
Well,
at the end what
they
did they do?
didn't set the stakes, and they never explained what they were at any point. So when they reach the end, you don't know what's happened, and you
But
can't
you're right.
understand because they haven't told. They'll tell you everything. They'll explain every minutia of detail except for what happened.
I just love he just runs off into the sunset and you're like, why? And he just keeps running at this weird...
Exactly. Why did he do that?
Oh, I'm sorry if you can hear my chair is just, I keep laughing and my chair is just squeaking because I'm just bouncing all over the place because I just keep picturing you running through the desert.
It's such a bad effect. It's like the cheapest effect.
I know. They should they should have gone with something else. It was bad.
He's just like pumping his arms up and down on a green screen, and they're just like they put like a motion blur on. It's like, look how fast he's going.
It looks so bad. It's so, and like it was curious because like again
remember in the first episode where they scooped a sandworm out of the desert with a giant spaceship and flew it off. It looked great.
I know, and I will argue there's parts of this where there's like ships landing, where they have the part where, you know, when Ali at the beginning starts like goes nuts and starts blowing everything up. Looked good. Looked good. There was these ships flying around and just blowing up Arrakis, and I was like, looks great. And then they have this running thing, and it looks like it's like from like one of these shows we've seen from like what?
You know what it looks like? It looks like Justice League of America.
It does a little bit. Oh, it was. I have such weird mixed emotions because you're right at that point. Like I kind of like what they're going for. The main point to have you watch is unclear at best. It's just like we don't know why anything's happening. And you're right, they didn't set the stakes from the beginning, and then they're sort of like spinning around giving you information as they go, and then you're like, so why? And they go, well, there was a golden path. You're like, did he take it? He had to go running. You're like, was that a good thing? Well, he had to go running in the desert. And they're like, but is this good for the people of Arrakis and Dune? And they're like, well, it's a new chapter. Don't worry.
You can be my consort. You can be my consort.
And I'm like, well, I'm glad I just spent 4.5 hours with you guys.
Yeah, man, oh man. Let's get to ratings then. What do you think of part 3? What do you want to give it out of 10?
I'm not sure. Like, I almost want to go right down the middle with a 5 is what I would have originally said. But I think like after us talking and after hearing you keep going on with the running, I think I'm going to knock it down to a 4 because I appreciate, I think, the effort. I just think in some ways it was very misguided. So I'm going to give it a 4 out of 10.
Listen, obviously, I think the first 2 were okay. I think I gave them pretty okay ratings, much better than the first one we watched. I clearly enjoyed them a lot more. I mean, it goes without saying, extremely disappointed by the Sandworm Man, like complete miss. But I mean, just beyond that, like watching this was like watching like a gymnastics routine. At the end of it, they just flip off and smash like it's a complete faceplant. Like it's like the dismount is such a disaster. I'm gonna give it a 2. It's awful. It was an awful ending.
It's a bad ending. I can't disagree with you, and I also can't disagree with your rating at all. I don't know why I feel like it's like I have this feeling in me of like I just feel bad for everyone or something. I'm like I gotta give it a couple extra points, but I don't disagree with you.
All right, Jordan. Well, that brings us to the end. You would like to find out the final rating for Children of Dune?
It's not going to be that low. I think it's going to be better than the first trilogy you watched.
Oh, well, it'll have to be. That one I went back and looked, and I gave a 1, and a 2 to the final episode.
So both of them, you felt the same finales were about the same.
Oh yeah, I think the finales are right on par. They really have the same finale. All right, let me punch into the computer here and bring up the final result. All right, Jordan. The final series score for Frank Herbert's Children of Dune, 4.67.
4.67. Yeah, I mean, it's probably about right.
I think that's not. I think that's probably pretty close. It's below average. Not a lot below average, but definitely below.
The funny thing about it is, it's not what you think. It's not like, sometimes the special effects weren't good. It's like, who cares? Sometimes the acting was like a little uneven. Who cares? Like sometimes, like you're saying, the costumes look good and then some reason someone's in jeans. You're like, okay. It's the actual storytelling And maybe I'm wrong. I feel like they were so true to the source material that it actually hurt them at a certain point, because there's too much. It's why people say Dune is unfilmable. It's like there's just too much information to get across. And I think it's a no-win scenario, because you could have done a much cleaner, more obvious version to know why people are doing what they're doing, what everyone's motivations are. But I think it would have irritated the people who love this, because I think if you love this, you would love that back history, and you love the detail and all the explanations, and that just can't be in this if you're trying to tell a coherent story.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a problem across all of them, but this one in particular, I think, had the worst of it. It had the worst case of Wikipedia summary scenes, like too many, to the point that almost all the scenes felt like Wikipedia summaries.
Yeah, I was watching this, and Jamie beside me, and she was just doing puzzles or something, and she just leaned over at one point, she's just like, "This is so boring," and I was like, "Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right."
And you're doing a puzzle.
But she enjoys the puzzles, but she's doing that, and but it's just like, just even being within the area of this happening. It's just it's the greatest sin is it ends up being boring, and you're right. It's the ending. If they had just like nailed that landing, you would have forgiven a lot of it, because you'd be like, oh, cool, this happened, and it was this big whatever action sequence that culminated from all these people. We've seen over time, but it wasn't that. It was just like the guy running in the desert, which was funny. It's still funny.
Well, Jordan, I think that wraps it up for Children of Dune. We did it. We've seen both the miniseries now. We're Dune experts. We know exactly what happens.
I'm glad we watched it. It means I don't have to read the books.
But listener, if you want to send us an email here, continuumdrag@gmail.com, and of course on Instagram, X, and Facebook, we're going to have clips. There's clips. We're going to see You'll see what we're talking about the running in the desert. You will see some of the better action sequences, but you'll get to see some of the fun of the episode.
This is one of these things where it will look better in these clips, and it's sort of thing. It's like you're just reading the headline. That's all you need,
Exactly. But listener, thank you for joining us. Jordan, I'll see you on the next one.
I'll see you then.
Can't get enough Continuum Drag? Commission a bonus episode for charity.
Want us to watch an episode we missed after using the escape pod or during a best of run? No problem.
Is there an episode of a series we've never watched or a TV movie you want us to cover? You got it.
Wish we'd comment on your favorite movie, content, or other weird media? Sure, why not?
All you have to do is make a donation to one of the charities selected by past guests on our website.
We suggest a donation of $50 per television hour of content we're watching, but everyone's means are different, so give what you can.
Get all the details about bonus episodes for charity on our website, continuumdrag.podbean.com, or follow the links in our social media profiles.
Continuum Drag is recorded in Ontario, Canada, and Seoul, South Korea. Theme music by James Rick Seidler, produced by Jordan Dullock and Luke Black. Special thanks to Aaron Hughes.